Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. I've been doing a countdown of my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 71 is Diablo III. If you played Diablo III when it came out, did not like various aspects about it, and are confused about this ranking, I understand. But the continued updates and certainly the Reaper of Souls expansion have done wonders for this game and made it my favorite action RPG I have ever played. If you played the game after those updates and changes happened and are a little confused, allow me to explain. Diablo III released in May of 2012, just as I was graduating high school, so naturally, I played a ton of it that summer. It had a full-length campaign, complete with the absolute highest production values you could imagine in a game at that time. End of list. Played Diablo 2 and got used to all of the new seasons and unique twists changing stuff up all the time? Yeah, that wasn't here. That doesn't exist. You got the campaign and you were going to like it. Granted, there is a lot of randomness to enemy spawns and side dungeons, and I'll get into all of that. And the campaign itself is fairly lengthy, and I do like it, but you definitely get tired of it eventually. There was, however, one really interesting and bold idea that should have never come remotely close to a game like Diablo with nearly infinite power scaling. There was an auction house, and if you're unfamiliar, you might think, oh, like vendors in the game, except with other players, and I can spend in-game gold to buy items and skip a bit of grinding. And you would be right. I personally think it defeats the entire purpose of the game, but you would be right. But wait, there's more. It's also an auction house, like with money, real actual US dollars. So that was a giant fiasco and caused a lot of problems, and eventually they took that away, and good riddance. Outside of that ordeal, I'll be covering the content in the base game first, and then talk about how Reaper of Souls fixed everything. I say fixed everything as if the game was awful before, and it wasn't. It just wasn't what it could have been. In the base game, you had 5 playable classes to pick from, and there's a lot going on there. Each one has tons of abilities and ways to modify them, different and unique gear, some dialogue differences from characters, though no actual narrative changes, and some have unique resource systems. The original 5 were Barbarian, Demon Hunter, Monk, Witch Doctor, and Wizard. While I've spent time with all of them, by far what I've played the most is Witch Doctor and Wizard. What can I say? I love spellcasters. The story kicks off with your character's arrival to Tristram, which really cannot escape horrible demonic invasions, apparently. There's armies of undead besieging the town, and you jump in to help. What spurred your adventure out of the town was a star that fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. After clearing up the town a little bit, you get sent to check out the star, and wind up saving the life of Deckard Cain. Good old, reliable Deckard Cain, who had helped guide your characters in the first 2 Diablo games. Back at town, he fills you in on all of the crazy things going on and introduces you to Leah, a young woman he has been protecting since her mother, Adria, died. You may remember Adria as the witch from the first Diablo game. From there, you head back to the cathedral where the star fell, and as you might remember as well, where the entirety of Diablo 1 took place, and once again defeat the Skeleton King, Leoric, who somehow keeps coming back, apparently. This whole section of the game is really fun, and feels like a great love letter to the first game, and it's just done very, very well. There are 2 ways I like to view Diablo 3's combat. Basically, there's the first phase, which is while you're lower level and just starting out. You can also jack up the difficulty if you want and extend this phase longer if you want to, and I highly suggest you do in your first playthrough of the story. This phase is characterized by very slow combat with longer time to kill on enemies and strategic gameplay with a lower enemy density relative to other things you can do. Lots of kiting and emphasis on core abilities. Admittedly, in the footage I recorded here, I didn't increase the difficulty on this new character, but I really like the slow pace once or twice. This would be something like my 20th time, so I'm no longer interested in that. I'll explain the second phase when we get there. The combat itself has a lot more structure than the first two games, though if you've played Diablo Immortal or watched my video on that, it'll feel closer to that, and I think for Diablo 4 it's close to. You have 6 ability slots by default bound to the keys 1 through 4, and then left and right click. Originally, each of those buttons is set to a different ability category, but you're able to just change them to anything if you do want to. So typically, left click is an attack that doesn't use resources and likely even generates your primary resource, which can be different based on your class. Then right click is a repeatable dump of that resource, and the other buttons could make or spend it while having a cooldown. I actually really like not changing the ability slots while leveling a class to max level for the first time, in large part because it makes it easier to explore the different things it does as it levels up, and you can kind of figure out what direction you want to go from there. Each time you level up, you unlock potentially new abilities, but perhaps instead, different runes for existing ones. The runes are the primary way you can modify what your abilities do, like adding or changing the element to an attack and increasing damage or adding all sorts of different utilities to it. Importantly, there's also passive abilities you unlock every once in a while that are separate from everything else, and you can assign a handful of those to your character. They're typically very powerful and do a lot of interesting things. So, after killing the Skeleton King, you head to the room behind the throne and discover that the Fallen Star is a man. Of course, he's special in some way, but we don't know why yet because he has amnesia. He knows he fell a long way and brought a warning of some terrible danger, but does not remember who or what he is or what the danger is. Very helpful. He knows he had a sword that broke apart as he fell, and you're off to find the different fragments. The trouble is, you're not the only one. There's a witch coven leader, Magda, who is also on the hunt, and she causes a lot of problems. Problems like, after you collect all the sword pieces, killing Deckard Cain. This was a big blow to me the first time I saw it, because Cain is an awesome old man. All he asked was that we stay a while and listen, and fight the devil himself. Was that so much? I mean, really.
Rage is overwhelming, girl. You win this round, but if the sword cannot be mine, I'll claim the one it's bound to. In the end, the blade shall be mine.
With Cain gone, it's up to Leah to pick up his research and scour all the knowledge he had amassed for guidance. Thankfully, she's not alone. With the stranger's sword reforged, he once again remembers who he is. The Archangel of Justice himself has descended to Earth to warn us of the coming dangers of the last remaining Lords of Hell. Belial, the Lord of Lies, has inserted himself into the ruling class of the Kingdom of Chaldeum, while Azmodan, the Lord of Sin, and General of all Hell's armies, is preparing to strike and take down all of civilization in the world of Sanctuary. So we head off to Chaldeum, and so ends Act 1. No, I will not spend this much time on every act. Also, the first act is, I think, the longest. You're getting the rest of the story here in broad strokes. Upon our arrival in Chaldeum, it becomes apparent that Belial has gained the ear of the Child Emperor Hakan. Guards work against our favor, and we are driven into the sewers where we discover some unlikely things happening. Unlikely things such as Adria is alive. There's a lot of cool characters in Act 2, so just real quick, here's the highlights. In the game, there's a few different crafting people you pick up over the course of the game who work for you in your camp. There's a blacksmith that makes weapons and armor, and an enchanter that does a lot of cool stuff I'll explain when I get to late game gearing. But in Act 2, we meet Covetous Shen, who is hilarious. I love this dude. But yeah, he makes and modifies gems that you put into gear to raise stats. It's not that exciting. But all of his dialogue is phenomenal. In addition, Adria is pretty cool, helping to guide you in a time when you're kind of lost on how to navigate against Belial's machinations. She has us set off to break into a dead wizard's laboratory, but he's not actually all that dead, just ghosty. Zoltan Kuhl was an evil man, but he's a certified badass, so I like him. Oh, and we learn that the character you're playing is the last living member of an ancient species called the Nephilim. That's like a bastardization of all of the strengths of angels, demons, and humans, but with like none of the downsides or baggage. It's a little weird being the ultimate life form, but here we are. Anyways, we kill Kuhl, again, kind of, ghost, hard to say. And we get the thing he's been guarding, the Black Soul Stone. It's got the souls of the other lords of hell trapped in it, and we're planning to throw the last two in there to save everybody. Fast forward a bit, and Hakan hasn't actually been sneaking around trying to feed us information without getting caught by Belial. He just is Belial, and we kill him. I actually really like the Belial fight with all the zones of death you have to avoid constantly, and he's just a really cool character. So we suck him into the Soul Stone and start figuring out where Azmodan is lurking. It's a really cool cutscene. By the way, I will always love Blizzard's cinematics team. They're phenomenal, regardless of any other issues that have ever happened to the company. They're great. Leah receives a vision from Azmodan directly through the Soul Stone.
Ravaging this world and all hope of resistance. My minions will find the stone, wherever you choose to hide it. Then, at long last, Azmodan shall reign as the prime evil.
Thankfully, Tyrael is there to pull her out. We head to Ariet to fight off the invading army. On to Act 3. Long story short, this is the most open area geographically, at least during the base game, and it's a really cool battleground. But we do the thing. Azmodan dies, and we suck him into the Soul Stone. Let's go to the armory to party with everyone else. We did save all of creation after all. Oh, wait. What's this? Oh wow, that's a lot of blood. That's like half a body. Ah, Adria had been secretly plotting against us this whole time, and we learned that Leah, including her birth, had been a long plan from Diablo himself. You see, he's Leah's daddy. Adria blasts the Soul Stone into Leah and then sends her up onto the high heavens. After some more cinematic goodness, she morphs into Diablo. Just bear with me here. Diablo is reborn as the prime evil with the souls of all of the other ones put inside him. We're in Act 4 now, and there's basically two things to note here. First is that all of the angels are pretty damn useless. They really suck. Like, the demons had their number and really made a mess of things, and you'd think this wasn't some fighting force that had been locked in eternal struggle. They just straight up lost.
No matter what form you choose to wear, let your true self be revealed.
but that's okay, because we, the Nephilim, are here and kind of blow Diablo up. The actual fight is super cool, but I wanted to get to the cinematics for you, so I played a high-level character on the easiest difficulty, making it laughable. There's a cool thing where you fight a shadow version of yourself, and there's lots of big attacks you're supposed to dodge. But as you see when I cover Phase 2 of combat in the game, with enough damage output, you can overcome anything. But ultimately, you save the day and strike down Diablo, who gets reabsorbed into the Black Soulstone. And that's the end of the base game. Woo! The replayability in that was basically to just keep doing that, but on increasingly higher difficulty settings, getting increasingly better gear. Don't get me wrong, it was still fun. The story is compelling, the bosses are interesting, and there's loads of random enemies and dungeons that can appear throughout your journey that kept things pretty interesting. Unique, rare, and epic enemies with random abilities slapped on them, like having chains of lava surround around them, or having a big shared health pool, or exploding when they die. Lots of fun stuff. It makes for lots of interesting designs and fights that even when you're just running around, you still find cool things to do, and they're more likely to drop the better gear. The sound design, by the way, of loot dropping cannot be overstated in its importance, and honestly, the attention to detail for everything in this game is remarkable. They hired a blood fluid mechanics engineer. Like, that was someone's job title leading up to making this game. There was a job posting, I remember it getting like talked about, of like, that's oddly specific. It was one person's job to improve water physics. They did. The water looks great in this game. And then a separate person's job was to improve blood physics specifically. That's insane. But there's only so many times you can keep doing this campaign before it gets repetitive and boring. Sure, you could play on hardcore mode so your character has permadeath, but with the game requiring a constant internet connection, I wasn't really that into doing that. And then Reaper of Souls came out and changed everything. In the pre-patch and other things leading up to it, a lot changed. I already mentioned the removal of the real money auction house, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Paragon levels, which are basically bonus levels to receive extra stats, got a complete overhaul and added points you spend on more interesting stats than just, stats, with Paragon levels also becoming shared across all of your maximum level characters. But more importantly, and this is big, they added Adventure Mode. Finally, no longer did we have to grind the campaign over and over and over. That being said, on to Act 5, and then I can actually talk about all the other stuff. Oh, there was also a new class added in Reaper of Souls with the Crusader. They're neat. They're neat. I didn't actually do a whole lot with them. And then there was another one that came out separately later. I never bought the Necromancer, although they do seem very cool. The story. After the defeat of Diablo and putting him back into the Black Soulstone, there were still some loose ends. We couldn't just rest and pretend everything was fine now. Adria was still alive, scheming something. There's also the matter of what we do with the stone itself. After all, if someone like Adria, let alone actually just her, got their hands on it, it could unleash everything all over again. So Tyrael took the mantle of Archangel of Wisdom and then orchestrated a hiding spot unbeknownst to any of the angels apart from himself. Unfortunately, that didn't last long. Act 5 is about fighting against the Archangel of Death himself, Malthael. I love Act 5. It's by far my favorite act on the game. For starters, Malthael himself is such an amazing antagonist and is genuinely the scariest of all the enemies we've faced, in my opinion, in the whole franchise. The twin scythes, the elegant movement, the way he saps the life and warmth out of everything around him, it's all so cool. And his minions! Diablo 3 is loaded with remarkable, breathtaking, interesting visual designs, but none of them are as cool as Malthael's Forces of Evil. After he steals the Black Soulstone, you track him down to Westmarch, which is normally quite the bustling center of trade, but it's a little dead there nowadays. I love the amount of time we actually do spend in the city. though there is a detour over the marshes to kill Adria. Hey, and she's gone. With all of the buildings in the city itself, I feel like there's more random events that happen, and you can discover more here than in any other part of the game. Act 5 is extremely replayable, and a blast every time. Late in the act, we also check out the battlefields of Pandemonium, where angels and demons are locked in eternal struggle, and Malthael has made his base of operations. It's all, again, extremely cool and interesting for several playthroughs. Malthael is also the hardest boss, in my opinion, in the phase 1 slower type of combat that I talked about. He's got a huge health pool, tons of incredible attacks. Can't say enough great things about Act 5 and Malthael. But in the end, we kill Death by blowing up the Black Soul Stone. This does mean, unfortunately, that the spirits of the Primevals are now released again, and they'll inevitably return. And that's the end. Hooray! I can shut up about campaign and get to the stuff that's the most fun. Adventure mode is great. Before I dive into how it works, I'm going to explain Phase 2, or whatever you want to call it, of combat. Basically, once you're maximum level, or probably a bit before it, you start getting some really crazy power going on. But a lot of that power is actually gated behind legendary rarity gear and gear sets with bonuses based on the amount of items you have from that set. These have unique upgrades and things regarding your abilities and everything else you do, and the sets are a huge deal. With Wizard, my favorite build focuses on an ability called Archon, which transforms me into an unstoppable death machine with newer, stronger abilities. The equipment set I use for that not only lowers the cooldown on this ability, but also gives me every rune on it, simultaneously. Amongst other things, this means that every time I kill something, I get a stacking buff increasing my damage. But what's more, is the set allows this buff to persist for a while after I'm not in Archon form anymore, meaning with enough enemy density, this has almost a permanent uptime. And when I say a stacking buff to damage, I mean in a good enemy density environment, we're talking thousands of % increases. It's huge. The second phase of combat is basically becoming God. The highest difficulties of the game have enemies that just do ludicrous amounts of damage and can melt you in an instant. However, your damage output scales so much faster than your survivability in this game, so it turns into this crazy arms race. As fun as the Wizard is, my strongest character is my Witch Doctor, who has a really awesome set of gear and abilities. It's built around damage over time effects like the ability Haunt. What this does is it does a massive amount of damage, but over a long period of time on an enemy, and if the enemy dies, it goes to find another host. That is, without the set bonus and other stacking abilities. First, there's a passive that makes it so your damage over time effects last basically forever. That's actually the tooltip. Then the 2-piece bonus on the set makes Haunt deal 10 seconds worth of damage when it targets an enemy that already has it. So therefore, it's no longer useless as something to spam when you only have one enemy you're fighting. Third, the 4-piece bonus affects an ability called Soul Harvest. This gives you a stacking buff up to 5 times, unless you do other things, that increases your damage output and defense for a while, refreshing each time you cast the ability with a nearby enemy. Your damage over time spells lower the cooldown of Soul Harvest now, and lastly, this is what makes it all insane and really work, the 6-piece bonus in the set. When you hit an enemy with Soul Harvest, it consumes any and all damage over time effects on them, dealing over 7 hours worth of damage to them. There's more gear you can find that makes all of these even crazier, but I unfortunately haven't gotten most of the other stuff, so you build your Witch Doctor at least a little tanky, and then get in the thick of things every once in a huge group of enemies after when your stuff's off cooldown, and have all of these damage over time effects on them, and just delete them. They die, they disappear, they go away. Nothing survives 7 hours of damage. It's can you imagine? It's a ton of fun and extremely powerful. I'm able to play on just about the absolute highest difficulty setting with my Witch Doctor, but I just need a little more defensive oomph to live long enough to pull off the big wombo combo on the things even higher, and who knows, I might get there someday. So what are we doing in adventure mode? Well, mostly we're just playing the game. There's things called bounties, and you can get 5 in each act. These can be things like repeating boss fights from the story, or special events, or clearing bonus dungeons. Whatever they are, you clear all 5 in an act, and they're random each time. And you get a chest with a bunch of items, including some special crafting materials. You'll use those with the Heraldric Cube. Remember Zoltan Cool? Well, we brought him back to life again, and he's gonna help us this time. He's got this ancient magic cube. This is one of the other ways you'll customize your characters, and it unlocks a lot of doors for you, build-wise. The cube does several things, but the most important one is that you can extract the special abilities from legendary items, and then assign one weapon ability, one armor ability, and one accessory ability. This lets you have multiple of these insanely powerful effects active at a time without having to worry about getting perfectly itemized versions of them with all of the stats you want. And speaking of stats you want, that's where the enchanter I mentioned earlier comes in. You can spend gold with her to re-roll one stat per item into potentially an entirely different stat, or maybe just better of the same. There's a lot of ways to apply this, and it explains it on each stat for each item for you. But once you've got your build perfect, what's left to do but flex about it? She can also transmogrify the appearance of your gear, including color palette, to anything you want, assuming it's an appearance you picked up as a piece of gear before. This is actually a ton of fun for having a great look on your character, and it's done in a way that's very easy and intuitive. I like it. A lot of the replayability of the game is in adventure mode, and I've barely scratched the surface here. There's keys to special boss fights you can collect. There's hilariously Whimsyshire. I love Whimsyshire. It's basically you take Great Value My Little Pony, throw it into Diablo, but still with all the blood and gore and violence. It's great and hilarious. I unfortunately did not find a portal to that for you while I was recording for this video, but it's there. Literally, there are hundreds of special events that will pop up in adventure mode, and it's always fun. But that's not where the real post-game really lies. It's just a way to prepare for it. There's something called rifts, and you can interact with an obelisk in your camp to open them. There's generic rifts, which scale based on your current difficulty selected. They're untimed, but you essentially go through portals of random levels throughout the game and kill a ton of stuff. Rare and epic enemies drop these little coins you can pick up, and those plus every kill you do fills a meter, which then spawns a Rift Guardian when full. Kill the big bad boss dude at the end of the rift, and gain a Greater Rift Keystone. Then, you can use that to open a Greater Rift and select your difficulty. This scales, I think, infinitely, and there's a big leaderboard. However, these are timed, and there's no loot from the enemies themselves, so you don't really have to get distracted or worry about it. Focus on killing stuff as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and prioritize finding elite or stronger enemies for those coins to drop. Kill the Rift Guardian, and you get a legendary gem. These offer some crazy strong bonuses, and you can't have more than one of each on a character. You'll also gain levels you can spend on the gems to make them better, and at a certain point they gain bonus abilities as well. Completing the rift before the timer finishes not only unlocks the next difficulty of greater rifts for you as an option, it also gives you bonus levels on these gems. There's more ways to continue improving your character, always and forever, but really it's just more and bigger numbers on top of more and bigger numbers. If the idea of trying to grind to catch up for people that have been doing this for over a decade isn't, appealing to you, don't worry. Every once in a while there's a new season that starts with the game, and everyone can make characters for that season and start fresh. There's increased drop rates on the better items, new cosmetics, balance changes with each season. In addition, there's new achievements for each season specific to it, and if you keep accomplishing these goals throughout different levels of the season, you'll unlock guaranteed awesome gear for that character, so it's a terrific way to gear up a class you haven't played as much of, or to get a set you haven't unlocked yet on your main character for that class, since once the season's over, all of those items can be shared with the rest of your characters. Seasons are cool, but ultimately, I like the characters I've already put time into, so I'm not that worried about doing season play. I know this video has been really long, but there's one last thing. There's a game mode called Challenge Rifts. Each week, there's a new challenge that basically takes a pre-made character, complete with gear and everything, and shoves it into your hands. You cannot modify this character in any way. You perform a Greater Rift at a fixed difficulty, and try to clear it as quickly as possible. Doing it within a floor time limit gives you a big bonus chest for your regular characters each week, and the variety it offers is a great little way to try out new builds or push yourself in interesting ways across a variety of difficulties. Of course, if you're feeling really competitive, you can push for a time on the leaderboard. I've played a ton of Diablo 3, and relative to other people that love it, it's not even like that much. Like, I've put in well over 1,000 hours, and that's not even considered hardcore. But even now, after over 12 years of playing this game, I still come back to it every once in a while to do some bounties, grind out some rifts, and hunt for achievements I haven't completed yet. Diablo 4 has come out to some interesting reviews, and honestly, I never even got, excited for it, because I know there's still so much I want to do in Diablo 3. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 70th favorite game, where I'll embarrass not only myself, but an entire room full of 30 and 40-something-year-olds with plastic instruments.